I would like you also to view the subject matter of what I've been speaking about in the context of beginnings. The liberal thinkers who, in the 18th century, were throwing off the shackles of the ruling classes were standing at a threshold. When the French revolutionaries had banned the aristocracy, they may have found themselves staring into an abyss. What do we do now? Where do we go from here? They too were at a threshold. And once the Bostonians had thrown the sea into the harbour and subsequently rid themselves of their English colonial rulers, I think they probably had a better plan than the French, but many of them must have asked themselves, what now? When a humble working man or woman had listened to Immanuel Kant and had timidly accepted his challenge to dare to know, what was the next move? And in the following century, when slaves were being given their freedom by their erstwhile masters, many of them must have been very scared at the prospect, for the first time, of taking decisions for themselves. Were not all these poised on the brink of the most exciting journey of their lives? They may not have been entirely sure where they were going, but one thing is for sure, they were ready to move forward as never before. And our soon-to-be initiated aspirant is about to engage in a life-altering insight of himself. Like the emancipated slave of the 18th century, he is about to assume responsibility for himself. As one of your own lodge members, Kirk McNulty, puts it in his book, The Way of the Craftsman, and I quote, "The body of humanity is represented as a quarry from which stone is to be cut to construct a temple to deity. While the rock remains in the quarry, it is part of the mass and experiences what the mass experiences. The candidate in the entered apprentice degree is about to separate himself out and to undertake to live his life as an individual, to be a separate stone. When he has recognized himself to be an individual, like the rough ashlar cut from the mountain, which will never be part of the bedrock again, the entered apprentice can never go back." Brethren, in the 18th century, in a world where such things had such importance, when a lodge was a refuge for right-thinking men to express their opinion on moral and social progress without being muzzled by the secular or ecclesiastical powers, I submit that it is unthinkable that our forebears were, first and foremost, concerned with how quickly they could achieve promotion to a higher rank, or how many of their lodge brethren they could subvert to advance their business interests, or how many hundreds more might be initiated in order to swell the coffers of Grand Lodge, as is the practice in some Grand Lodges in the world. Let us remember that although in the 18th century lodges met every month and often more frequently, an initiation might only take place, say, once every 4 years, and that initiate might then wait a number of years before being passed to the second degree. We can calculate that under those circumstances, an initiation would have taken place perhaps only once every 20 meetings. And what do you suppose the lodge was doing during the other 19 meetings? Well, records were normally never kept, or only incompletely, but there are indications. In London, the Burlington Lodge of Instruction in 1810 taught the younger brethren by means of lectures, probably the lectures of William Preston. Although we have only scant evidence of what those 19 meetings might have entailed, we have enough circumstantial evidence to draw an outline of Masonic practice. They were certainly more interested in contemplation, in debate, in moral progress, and in questioning the world around them. Consider, for example, that a candidate for initiation in the 18th century was taken first to a chamber of reflection, rather dimly shown. As is still the practice in many countries outside Anglo-Saxon Freemasonry. This took place before the candidate was taken to the door of the temple to seek admission. In that darkened and sparsely furnished room were a table, chair, and writing materials. On the table were a number of objects: a skull, a lit candle, a bell, an hourglass. On the walls were a number of inscriptions warning the candidate against coming to Freemasonry with the wrong motives. Now, a seeker in this situation had already set out on the most exciting of journeys. He was required to state clearly and in writing what his motives were for coming to Freemasonry. What did he expect of the Brotherhood? What could the Brotherhood expect of him? And these replies were then carried into the lodge and read out aloud, so that the brethren could decide whether or not he was a worthy man to be made a Mason. We may be surprised to learn that as often as not they ruled that he was not worthy to proceed. He had to go home. Admission was not at all automatically to be assumed. This, of course, was not a physical journey, but a journey for the heart and for the mind. I asked you earlier to imprint this image on your mind. The image of the candidate, blindfolded, standing at the west end of the carpet facing east, about to be led up to the altar to take his obligation. This initiate, then, is standing on the threshold of a journey, physically not a long one, but in itself an allegory of a much more significant, arduous journey, a journey no less important than that of any people's freeing themselves from oppression or tyranny. A journey no less important than that of a person learning to think for himself. For this initiate is now embarked on the journey of discovery, the discovery of himself, the discovery of his abilities, no less, and through knowledge, then, the knowledge of his fellow men and of the universe he inhabits. Now, alongside Kant's dictum of dare to know, we have another. Man, know thyself, said Pythagoras. Then thou shalt know the universe and God. And once this initiate reaches the altar, the blindfold will be removed, and light, material, figurative, and spiritual light will be imparted to him. But we cannot acquire that precious knowledge of self and universe by standing still, by obligating ourselves to listen, to obey, to submit ourselves to the regulations of Freemasonry. Our profession as Freemasons is most assuredly a dynamic pursuit, not a static one. We must move forward in order to fulfill our Masonic vocation. We must continue to ask questions, for without that our personal fund of knowledge will not increase. Without an increase in knowledge, we cannot achieve an increase in wisdom. And all the allegories concerning journeying are there to help us. In times gone by, in all pursuits of self-discovery and self-improvement, as well as spiritual quests, a pilgrimage was necessary. Indeed, in many jurisdictions, the fellow-craft second-degree Mason is known as a journeyman, for in the second degree he is embarked on the journey of life itself, a long and sometimes arduous journey, a true pilgrimage in search of knowledge and of wisdom. In the ancient world, the deities who controlled certain areas of life were unable to operate outside those areas. Their power to favour or to destroy operated only within their own area. So a man from the mountains who found himself in the plain and was in need of divine help had to make a pilgrimage back to his place of origin, back to the mountains, in order to be one with the deity controlling the mountainous region. Pilgrimages, therefore, are journeys with a sacred or spiritual intent, and spirit and quest play a crucial part in Freemasonry. My journey to you today, in answer to your call to come and speak to you, is a pilgrimage for me. Were a pilgrimage not a journey with a sacred intent, we would not invoke the name of the great architect or pray together in the temple. And so it is equally crucial that we address the nature of spirituality and how it relates to our craft. Spirituality encompasses matters of the spirit, a concept tied to a multidimensional reality. Spiritual matters regard humankind's ultimate nature and purpose, not as material biological organisms, but as spirits or energy with an eternal relationship beyond the bodily senses, beyond time, and beyond the material world. We might like to consider that we are not a physical body containing a soul. We are a soul which happens to be clothed in a physical body. In mythology and literature, a quest, a journey towards a goal, serves as a symbol. Quests, such as Chaucer's pilgrimage in Canterbury Tales, appear in the folklore of every nation and also figure prominently in non-national cultures. The objects of quests required great exertion on the part of the hero, and the overcoming of many obstacles, typically including much travel. In Anglo-Saxon Freemasonry, I'm talking now about the emulation ritual, we have further allegories of the virtue of journeying or of pilgrimage. In the second section of the second emulation lecture, we have the following exchange. Question: did you ever travel? Answer: my forefathers did. Where did they travel? Due east and west. What was the object of their travels? They travelled east in search of instruction, and west to propagate the knowledge they had gained. Looked at another way, they travelled eastwards into the rising sun, because they were seeking the warmth, the sustenance, the light, and above all, the light of knowledge. East and west have significant and recurring importance for Freemasons. The Freemason always travels east in search of instruction and knowledge, and through those two, wisdom. It is no accident that we in the Western world have always looked east for knowledge, enlightenment, and wisdom.